ওই দোনে কান্না ধরলে এবার এই জালতে দিয়ে কাটিয়ে এভাবে তুলতে হবে।
আগে ভয় করে না?
হ্যাঁ করে। ঠিক আছে।
যা মন্ত্র সেটাই বলবে না।
ওই দিদা আসছে।
এই খোঁজটা
আমাদেরই না। আমরা করি কেন যে আমাদের এই পূজা জঙ্গলে আমরা থাকতে ওই মাকে বলে আমরা মা চরণ ধরে নিয়ে জঙ্গল চলে, এই জন্য আমরা হিন্দু শাস্ত্রে মাকে পূজা করি। হ্যাঁ, আদি মন্ত্র পূজা হচ্ছে মুসলমানের। আমাদের কালী হরি দুর্গা শিব আমরা করতে পারি, যেটা আমরা করি কেন না আমরা জঙ্গলে চলি, এই কারণে আমরা পূজা করি, মাকে ভক্তি করি। মার ভক্তির কারণে আমরা এই পূজাটা করি। বুঝতে পারছি? এই বনদ এই বাড়ু করি এটা আমাদের এখন আমাদের পেশা হয়ে গেছে ওই মায়ের পূজা। না ওদের কিরম ওই মসজিদ করে আছে, সেখানে যাবে নামাজের খানে গিয়ে নামাজ করে পূজা করবো, ওই একদিনই নিয়ে রাখা হয়। আজকে কালকে হয়ে গেছে ওদের পূজা। হ্যাঁ
আচ্ছা, বনবিবি পূজা।
হ্যাঁ, কালকে পূজা হয়ে গেছে, বনু হয়ে গেছে। থাকে বনু, তাহলে ওই বনু হচ্ছে মুসলমানের মেয়ে। বুঝতে পেরেছেন? মুসলমানের মেয়ে ওই ওর মাকে গর্ভ সমাজে ওই জঙ্গলে তুলে দিয়েছিল বাবা।
There you are. Well, as you can see, the traditions of Bengal, of the folk traditions of Bengal, and indeed of many other parts of India, really don't conform at all to the sorts of discourse that we get about religion and about religious divisions and so on. And just as in the Sundarbans you can't separate land and water, you really can't separate different sorts of traditions either. It's a very, very much more complicated phenomenon than people think. Anyway, so now I'm going to read to you about from my new book, Gun Island. So, as you can see, it's really new. So I'm reading from the manuscript. The strangest thing about this strange journey was that it was launched by a word, and not an unusually resonant one either, but a banal, commonplace coinage that is in wide circulation from Cairo to Calcutta. That word is banduk, which means gun in many languages, including my own mother tongue, Bengali or Bangla. Nor is the word a stranger to English. By way of British colonial usages, it has found its way into the Oxford English Dictionary, where it's glossed as rifle. But there was no rifle or gun in sight the day the journey began, nor indeed was the word intended to refer to a weapon. And that precisely was why it caught my attention, because the gun in question was a part of a name, Bonduki Shodagar, which could be translated as the gun merchant. The gun merchant entered my life, not in Brooklyn, where I live and work, but in the city where I was born and raised, Calcutta, or Kolkata, as it is now formally known. That year, as on many others, I was in Kolkata through much of the winter, ostensibly for business. My work as a dealer in rare books and Asian antiquities requires me to do a good deal of on-site scouting. And since I happen to possess a small flat in Kolkata, carved out of the house that my sisters and I inherited from our parents, the city has become a second base of operations for me. But it wasn't just work that brought me back every year. Kolkata was also sometimes a refuge, not only from the bitter cold of a Brooklyn winter, but from the solitude of a personal life that had become increasingly desolate over time, even as my professional fortunes prospered. And the desolation was never greater than it was that year, when a very promising relationship came to a shockingly abrupt end. A woman I had been seeing for a long time cut me off without explanation, blocking me on every channel that we had ever used to communicate. Suddenly, with my 60s looming in the not-too-distant future, I found myself more alone than ever. So I went to Calcutta earlier than usual that year, timing my arrival to coincide with the annual migration that occurs when the weather turns cold in Europe and North America, and great flocks of foreign-settled Calcuttans like myself take wing and fly back to overwinter in the city. I knew that I could count on catching up with a multitude of friends and relatives, that the weeks would slip by in a whirl of lunches, dinner parties, and wedding receptions. And the thought that I might, in the midst of this, meet a woman with whom I might be able to share my life was not, I suppose, entirely absent from my mind. But of course, nothing like that came to pass, even though I lost no opportunity to circulate and was introduced to a good number of divorcees, widows, and other single women of an appropriate age. So the months slipped by in a cascade of disappointments, and the day of my return to Brooklyn was almost at hand when I went to the last of my social engagements of the season, the wedding reception of a cousin's daughter. I had just entered the venue, a stuffy colonial era club, when I was accosted by a distant relative, Kanai Dutt. I hadn't seen Kanai in many years, which was not entirely a matter of regret for me. He had always been a glib, vain, precocious know-it-all, who relied on his quick tongue and good looks to charm women and get ahead in the world. He lived mainly in Delhi and had thrived in the hothouse atmosphere of that city, establishing himself as a darling of the media. It was by no means uncommon to turn on the television and find him yelling his head off on a talk show. He knew everyone, as they say, and was often written about in magazines, newspapers, and even books. The thing that most irritated me about Kanai was that he always found a way of knocking me off my balance. This occasion was no exception. He began by throwing me a curveball in the shape of my childhood nickname, which I had long since abandoned in favor of the more American-sounding Dean. "Tell me, Dinu," he said after a cursory handshake, "is it true that you have set yourself up as an expert on Bengali folklore?" The almost audible sneer rattled me. Well, I spluttered, I did some research on that kind of thing a long time ago, but I gave it up when I left academia and became a book dealer. But you did get a PhD, didn't you? He said with barely concealed derision. So you are technically an expert. I would hardly call myself that. He cut me short without apology. So tell me then, Mr. Expert, he said, have you ever heard of a figure called Bunduki Shadagar, or the gun merchant? He had clearly been intending to surprise me, and he succeeded. The name Bunduki Shadagar, or the gun merchant, was so new to me that I was tempted to think that it was made up. What do you mean by figure? I said. You mean some kind of folk hero? Yes, like Dukhin Rai or Chand Shadagar. He went on to name a few other well-known characters from Bengali folklore, Shuttupir, Lukhindar and the like. Such figures are not quite gods, and nor are they merely saintly mortals. Like the shifting mudflats of the Bengal Delta, they arise at the conjuncture of many currents. Sometimes shrines are built to preserve their memory, and almost always their names are associated with a legend. And since Bengal is a maritime land, seafaring is often a prominent feature of such tales. The most famous of these stories is the legend of a merchant called Chand Shadagar, who is said to have fled overseas in order to escape the persecution of Manusha Devi, the goddess of snakes and of all poisonous creatures. There was a time in my childhood when the merchant Chand and his nemesis, Manusha Devi, were as much a part of my dream world as Batman and Superman would become after I had learned English and started to read comic books. Back then, there was no television in India, and the only way to entertain children was to tell them stories. And if the storytellers happened to be Bengali, then sooner or later they were sure to circle back to the tale of the merchant Chand and the goddess who wanted him as her devotee. The story's appeal is, I suppose, not unlike that of the Odyssey, with a resourceful human protagonist being pitted against vastly more powerful forces, earthly and divine. But the legend of the merchant Chand differs from the Greek epic in that it does not end with the hero being restored to his family and patrimony. The merchant's son, Lukhindar, is killed by a cobra on the night of his wedding, and it's the boy's virtuous bride, Behula, who reclaims his soul from the underworld and brings the struggle between the merchant and Manusha Devi to a fragile resolution. I don't remember when I first heard the story or who told it to me, but constant repetition ensured that it sank so deep into my consciousness that I wasn't even aware that it was there. But some stories, like certain life forms, possess a special streak of vitality that allow them to outlive others of their kind.